We will start promptly. I hope everybody had a good night's sleep and everybody's awake and ready to absorb the information about experimental methods in psycholinguistics. Alright, I see a lot of excited faces and I take it as a yes. Please raise your hand if you're comfortable with the tempo I'm speaking in English. Perfect, I would say 80%. Please raise your hand if you would prefer me talking much slower. No? Okay. I will slow down a little bit, alright? If you don't understand anything, or if you don't understand something, please raise your hand and ask a question. I'm not biting you, and I hope I don't look like I'm a crazy person, so I will answer your question. Don't worry about it. Okay, so I don't know why the slide is a little bit cut off on the top, but it's not a big worry. I don't have any other slides that have a lot of information on top, so it's fine. And on top it says experimental psycholinguistics overview, and I will also focus on eye tracking today because that's what I do, that's what I'm an expert at, and that's what I'm able to answer any questions you have. And I will start by introducing myself. Okay, I don't know why slides are doing that, it's fine. So I actually grew up in Nizhny Novgorod, and I graduated from the foreign linguistics department in there with my bachelor degree. And then I moved to the United States and I received 2 MA degrees in master's degrees in cognitive science and linguistics and in psychology. And then a PhD from the City University of New York just recently, I guess 2 years ago now. And now I'm a proud postdoc researcher at the Center for Language and Brain in Moscow. It's a great center. We have a lot of research going on in different capabilities. I will encourage you to go on the website to see what's going on and see what you're interested in. And write us letters, write us emails, go to your advisors and talk about that. Maybe after this lecture, you will find your way and you will find something that excites you. So, as I mentioned before, my research is actually eye tracking and bilingualism. I'm really interested in acquisition of multiple languages in one mind. Specifically, I was working with English and Russian, of course, and with heritage speakers of Russian. So heritage speakers are people who were born in English-speaking country, like the United States, for instance, but the family is Russian, so like our immigrants, right? So they grew up actually speaking Russian, and then they go to school and they switch to English, and that's where I come in. I want to know what's happening inside their mind, inside their brain, when they do that switch from Russian to English, and how do they process Russian while they grow up. And I will actually tell you, they lose it. It's not a big secret anymore. And I do that with the tools, with the research method of eye tracking, and I will talk about this a lot closer to the end of the lecture. So this is an overview. It's supposed to be easy. If it's not easy, raise your hand, and I will explain it in easy terms. What we will discuss. We will start with answering the question, what is psycholinguistics? What do we mean when we say we plan a psycholinguistic experiment? What offline research methods can we use? What online methods are there? And when you think about offline and online, when you have and not have internet, it's not about that. Something else, I will tell you in a little bit. And lastly, eye tracking. And I will tell you about 2, maybe even 3 different paradigms that we have in eye tracking and that we can use with children and adults. Are there any questions so far? Good. So, what is psycholinguistics? Well, by the name of their subject, you can already tell, right? It's psychology plus linguistics. We are somewhere in the middle of the whole cluster of cognitive science studies, and it's a combination of psychology and linguistics. And probably all of you here know what is linguistics, right? Study of language, different levels, morphology, lexics, syntax, right? Or we study the questions like how do we acquire language, how do we speak to one another, and so on. Psychology is the study, when we talk about humans, is the study of how humans behave. So by combining these two, psychology and linguistics, we actually study how do humans behave in respect to language. Right? Okay, easy enough. So, psycholinguistics is an interdisciplinary study field because it's combining two major studies in which the goals are to understand how people acquire language, how they use it to speak and understand one another, how it is represented and processed in the brain, and its breakdown and impairments. These are, of course, limited questions. They're major questions, and there are a lot of sub-questions in each and one of them. Alright, so let's imagine that we have a question. For instance, how do babies acquire language? And specifically, my narrow question is, I will just make it up right now. Let's say, do babies acquire nouns or verbs first? What do you think, by the way?
Nouns.
Somebody say, yeah.
Because they say mom did that.
Nouns. Well, it actually depends on the language, but there's some different specifics, but generally in Russian or English, for instance, these are nouns. Alright, let's say I have this theory, right? That babies acquire nouns first and verbs later. I have this question in my mind, what do I do next? If I'm functioning within psycholinguistics, how do I prove my thought that nouns are coming first? Are there any ideas?
Give a bird to me.
I give what? A bird?
Yes.
And then observe it, right? Not now, okay? Wait 2-3 years, please. Any other ideas? How do I confirm my thought that nouns I acquired first? Don't be afraid to speak up. If you're wrong, I won't tell you.
You can take some group of babies that are growing up right now in presence, and then observe them and take the results if they have nouns first or verbs.
Dan is actually moving in the very right direction. So I need to do something in experimental psycholinguistics, when we talk about experimental studies with a group of participants. So we need to plan an experimental study in psycholinguistics. How do we do that? There are different steps, but they're all kind of always the same. First of all, we formulate the hypothesis, okay? So my hypothesis is that babies, let's say in Russian or in a deep language, acquire nouns first and then verbs. I formulated that. Then I have to design a study to test my hypothesis. And Lana was going again in the right direction, so I need to select my group of participants, right? Let's say I need to select babies that do not speak yet, but let's say they already understand the language. Let's say it's 1 year. Okay, there's some words emerging in there, but not full, maybe even before. Okay, I decided that I will do a study with this group of babies, and then I need to design my materials. How do I test that? And then we'll talk about this a little bit later, about the materials and stimuli and all that. Then I need to collect data in the study that I just designed. I need to analyze this data, and I will be honest speaking with you right now, in psycholinguistics, in the modern state of psycholinguistics, we usually do statistical tests to analyze the data. There are qualitative research, but most of it is we need statistical tools to analyze the data. And finally, we will look at these tests and we will see what are the results. And these results will either confirm or reject my initial hypothesis. And hopefully it confirms, or it maybe even rejects. It's also interesting. If I reject my hypothesis, it means that verbs are required first. And it's interesting too. After that, I pile out my thoughts, I put it all on the paper, and I send my paper to a scientific journal. And hopefully they will be kind enough to publish it. And yay, we have a scientific, not a breakthrough, but a step further. Great, so now we actually do some interactive stuff, and I need one volunteer here. It's very easy, please. Anybody wants to come up here? It's very easy. You will need to press a couple buttons. Come on. What's your name? Come on. Perfect. So do the screen share. What was the keys for the screen share again?
Nobody knows.
No. Yes, that will work, I think. Perfect. So you can stand by the keyboard, and we will do a small task right now. So your task will be, okay? You will see two words on the screen. You can look at this screen, it's much more comfortable. And you will need to press A in English if you think both words that you see in English are actually words in English. Okay? And you will press letter L if you think one of them or both of them are actually nonsense words in English. Okay? So A, both words in English, and L, they're not words in English. One of them is. Alright? You can click to start.
Take a seat.
Yeah, if it's more comfortable, please take a seat. Let's actually confirm that I did the instructions right. In this task, you will see two words at a time. If both words are real English words, you press the button A. If one or both words are nonsense words, you press the button L. Respond as fast and as accurate as you can. You ready? Press spacebar to start. Spacebar. The big one on the bottom. Perfect. Okay. It's okay. That's it. Thank you so much. I know it's very difficult to be on the spot. You can take your seat back. Perfect. And we have results. Alright guys, so how was this, right? What did I do? Are there any ideas? What was this all about? What I will tell you, it's actually a real experiment in psycholinguistics. It's just like a mini version of it. And there are actually real hypotheses, real results, and blah, blah, blah. So what do you think was the hypothesis of this mini experiment? Yes, Dan?
How fast her brain can scan and translate the words and maybe understand that they are English or not English at all.
This is a part of it. Great. But there is actually something else in there. And because we are all bilinguals in here, right, we speak 2 or 3 languages, this might be a question there too. Are there any other ideas? look at the results on the screen. There are some hints there. Yes, please.
This can show our ability to teach other languages.
Not quite right. Anything else? Anybody? Look, we have first line related words, second one unrelated words. Did you notice that some of the pairs, when you see on the screen, when they were both words in English, were somehow related to each other? Does any?
Yeah, the translation word, sorry, is close. They're close. So brain can faster do the understanding and this kind of a translation too.
That's perfect. If you notice, there were pairs that were doctor and nurse.
Yeah.
They are semantically related by the meaning, right? So they're in the same semantic category, the same semantic cluster. And there were something like bread and butter, for instance, also semantically related. But then, sometimes you could see doctor and bread. Well, maybe in Russian there's some kind of saying that relate them, but for instance not in English, right? So related pairs like doctor and nurse, and unrelated words like doctor and bread. And you see some kind of results in there. What does it mean? What does MS stand for? Standing for? Does anybody know? Milliseconds. But yes. How many milliseconds in a second? 1,000. You won't believe it. When I ask my American students about that, they don't know. They have no idea. They think the second is the smallest unit of measurement of time. So yes, 1,000 milliseconds in a second, and we have results. For related words, it was 1,031, and unrelated words, it was 1,166, 1166. So, what do you think is happening? Why is it? I will ask. So let's come to the beginning. What was my hypothesis here? Now it should be a little bit easier.
I think when those were related, she responded fast.
Perfect. And that's, in this form of statement, is the hypothesis. That we will respond faster pressing the button, right? And this pressing the button is kind of as the process that reflected what's going on in the brain. We process the words. We visually recognize them. Faster to ones that are related than to those that are unrelated. Well, I won't torture you with the theoretical stuff, but in very short words, the models of how words are organized in our brain, in our mind, state that it's kind of a huge network, like a spider network, where all words connected. But those that share semantic features, that share the meaning, like doctor and nurse, they're actually closer together in this huge network of words. And that's why when you see doctor, it's much faster to get to nurse in this huge network than from doctor to bread. And that's why we process them much faster. Is it clear? In a very brief and clear explanation. And that's the hypothesis. So we'll process the words that share semantic meaning much faster than words unrelated. By looking at these numbers, do you think our hypothesis is confirmed? Yes, right? So 1031 is less than 1166. We will do a statistical analysis, is that time, and we'll confirm it statistically. But right now, yes, the hypothesis is confirmed. Great, I will go back to the PowerPoint slides, and I will just tell you now that this experiment in psycholinguistics is called lexical decision. Slideshow on the current slides. You're ready to answer, but I'll also ask you again. What was this measurement that I did? Let's imagine I was the experimenter who ran this experiment. What did I measure? What was my variable of interest? How did I measure that we respond to that one faster than to the other one? What is it? I'm talking about the unit of measurement. We already mentioned it. Milliseconds. That's great. So something that I measure, which was milliseconds, which we in psycholinguistics call reaction time, right? How fast we react, is my dependent variable. So this is just basic terms that we need in psycholinguistics to understand when we plan, conduct, and report the experiment. Reaction time was my dependent variable. What conditions did I use to measure reaction time? What I, as an experiment, as a researcher, manipulate to understand, to confirm or disconfirm my hypothesis? Are there any ideas? There were two conditions. We already mentioned them too.
Connected and disconnected words?
Perfect. That's correct. So word relatedness, right? Whether they were related to each other or not, these were my conditions, and this is called independent variable. That's something that I manipulate as a researcher. What did data show? We agreed that it showed that I confirmed my hypothesis that we process related words, even for you as bilinguals, much faster than the words that were not related. So great, that was our first mini psycholinguistic experiment we did. If we had a chance, we'll report it and publish, but we won't have a chance because it was published in 1956, I think. Alright, so let's just overview again. How do we do an experiment in psycholinguistics? So we have an idea, we generate a hypothesis, then we design a study, conduct a study, analyze data, interpret results, report results, refine hypothesis, and this is never-ending cycle. On the result that we got a new idea, go back, generate idea based on the results. So this is the overview of the process. There are different kind of tools or measures to conduct the experiments with. They are generally divided into two types. The first one is offline, and the second one is online methods. So if you can see on the screen here, I have an arrow that goes down, and it's representing the time sensitivity from none to milliseconds on the bottom. So generally, we are talking about offline methods when we don't have this time sensitivity. I will explain in just a little bit what this means. And when we talk about online methods, there is a great time sensitivity. On the left of this table, you'll see actually the dependent variables that we use when we use this method. For instance, the reaction time. We just did a small experiment using this dependent variable. So offline methods. Some experimental procedures collect responses offline, that is, after processing routines have applied. What it means that you design an experiment, you give it to your participant, and then you collect their responses after the experiment is done. Let's say, well actually let's not say, but just go further. These are two major types of the offline methods that we use in psycholinguistics. These are questionnaires and something like sentence picture matching tasks. These are not the only ones, but they are very popular. So in questionnaire, for instance, let's say I have an experiment, I have an idea to test that some structures in English, I don't know, sound correct for people who live in South Carolina, but they don't sound grammatically correct for people who live in New York. Let's say, I just made it up. So one of the methods that I can use to test this hypothesis is just basically do a Google form and send it to people living in South Carolina, and then send them to people who live in New York. And what I will get back is people will read the sentences, their own tempo, and they will just click right on the choices correct, grammatically correct, grammatically is not correct. They'll go back to me, and I will analyze how many people say it's correct, how many people say it's incorrect in different states. That's it. That's my experiment, and this is offline, right? Because I actually analyzed the data, I collected the data, and I did all the statistical analysis after the experiment done. It's not a real-time experiment. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So a participant reads or listens to a sentence and answers a comprehension question. In questionnaire, the measures of interest is how participants respond to complex sentences, for instance, the correct and incorrect answers, error rates can be analyzed, or ambiguous sentences that we will be analyzing preferences. I will explain it just a little bit. For instance, in English, there is a sentence. Someone shot the servant of the actress that was on the balcony. The question to you, who was on the balcony? Raise your hand if you think it's actress. 1, 2, well, 3 people, 4 people think it's actress actually. Who thinks it's servant? Majority of the class thinks it's servant. Well, that's actually a great question. Nobody knows. This sentence is called ambiguous sentence, when 2 interpretations are possible. And there are a lot of experiments going on, still going on with this kind of sentences that actually use the questionnaire, for instance, right? I just ask you, who was on the balcony? And you put actress or the servant. So I will tell you that, for instance, the first experiment like that was in 1988 in Spanish speakers. And it's called relative clause, right? Relative clause attachment. What it means that, so that was on the balcony is our relative clause, right? You can attach it low to actress, so the word just before it, or to the servant, and it's a high attachment. So, and what this research in the last 4 decades now showed that people speaking different languages actually attach differently. So for instance, Spanish speakers prefer attach high to the servant, low attach in English, Romanian, Basque, Chinese, German, Russian is still going on, but probably it's slow. High attach in Dutch, Italian, French, Croatian, Greek. And there's still going a lot of research that add more and more languages to this kind of experimental psycholinguistic research. So, the question for you guys, these questionnaires, what are the major pros, advantages and cons, disadvantages of using these offline methods of testing your hypothesis? What do you think are the pros, big advantages? Anyone? Yeah.
Maybe you know personally who are taking part in your experiment.
This is actually absolute opposite. If you send out a Google form and if you don't collect a very personal data, you have no idea who is taking this experiment. And if you pay for it, which I did at some point of my life, so people of all kind of stuff taking the experiment just to get money, and I have no idea is he, let's say, how to speak of Russian or not, for sure. So this is actually a con. You do not know exactly who your participants are. Yeah, any other ideas?
Maybe the huge amount of people that can be in the experiment.
Absolutely, yes. If you send out a questionnaire, let's say Google form, to 5,000 people, 1,000 responses come back, it's a huge data collection process. It's very good. What other, well, mentioned one disadvantage. Any other ideas? Absolutely, yes. So, pros, right? They're cheap, they're easy, fast. Good for use with various populations, no special equipment needed, good for establishing an issue. So if you have an idea, it's actually very good to test it first with something like that. Very fast, very cheap. You can get, if you collect a lot of data, you probably get an answer you want to test it further. But again, it's not sensitive enough, subject to interpretation, no connection to what really happens in real time. What I mean by real time, I don't know what is going on in your brain, in your mind when you attach, right? You just click the answer, right? Correct, not correct. But what if I want to see actually how do you process the sentence in real time? And that's where online methods are coming in. So these are procedures that are broad interest because that allows psycholinguists to ask sophisticated questions about how language processing takes place in real time. Measure behavior while the participants in the middle of processing a word or a sentence. Okay. I will show you the slide what kind of online methods we can use. In spoken language, one of the most popular, for instance, picture naming. Just show a baby or toddler or just a child a lot of pictures and ask him to name those pictures as fast as possible. That's actually how we measure active vocabulary sets in babies in different languages, for instance. Written language, lexical decision, you just did it. Self-paced reading, I will show you how it looks like. Eye tracking, something that we will be talking about. Eye movements in reading, visual world paradigm. These are all online methods. And if you remember that graph that I showed with the arrow going down, with the time sensitivity, these are all kind of in the middle still. When we're talking about really real-time experiments, we're going to neuroimaging methods. These are ERPs, when we place the electrode cap or hat on your scalp and we measure electrical activity from the surface of the scalp while we process the sentence. fMRI or I always confuse this with encephalography. That's good. Or combinations of these methods actually. Right now, there are a lot of research going combining eye tracking and one of these methods that get you a real-time experiment. But let's talk a little bit about these kind of methods first. So self-paced reading, self-explanatory too. So it's when you read and you self-pace yourself, how you read. The logic is readers will slow down when they read a word that needs extra processing due to complexity of the sentence or something called GP effect, it's garden path effect. Garden path is when the sentence is ambiguous, the one about the servant and the actress, for instance. So how it looks like. First, the participant sees nothing on the screen, and she needs to press the button to go further and further to read the sentence word by word. Something like this. And then there will be a question, a comprehension question. So what our idea is here is that the participant will slow down when she will read the part of the sentence that is hard to understand, right? That was on the bottom, that area. And she will or he will press the button to go to the next word later than on the previous words. Then we collect this data and we measure reaction time again. So my hypothesis would be that reaction time, how you press the button, on the words that are in the beginning of the sentence will be much faster to the words that are in the relative clause, because this is where the difficulty is coming from. And this is where we think the mind is stuck. Has to go back to reanalyze it, that takes much more processing time. Great. Okay, so now I have a question for you again. Let's say I have a question, psycholinguistic question, a linguistics question. How early do infants understand WH questions? Very complex questions, like that. What did the book hit? Or what hit the keys? Or what hit the book? Let's say it will be what hit the keys. These are very complex questions. First one is the VH subject question, right? The book is an agent of an action. What did the book hit? And the second one is object question. What hit the keys? The keys are here is the object, right? The patient. So, do you see how difficult these questions are, right? And how difficult should be for babies to understand. So my question is, how early actually do infants, do babies understand this kind of questions? Now I ask you, let's take, I don't know, maybe half a minute to think, how would you test this hypothesis? And let's say babies do not talk yet. They are, I don't know, 9 months, 10 months. If you have an idea, raise your hand. How do I test this question? By the way, does anybody have an idea how old are infants when they understand these questions? And let's say English-speaking infants, of course. What do you think? I'll tell you after I explain the experiment. Any ideas? How do we test with babies who do not speak? Yes?
Maybe by showing them the book itself.
Showing them something, right? That's a great idea. By showing them something, we're going in the right direction. Alright, so this is an experiment I think was done in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. And what they did is they decided that their participants are, as far as I remember, 10-month-old babies, then 15 months, a different group, and then 20 months. And when we talk about babies, we usually talk about months, not years. And so what they did, they showed them the video first. And the video was like that. The first video, the book was going to the case and hit the case. And on the second one, I just don't show them the screen, was the opposite. And then what they did is they did an experiment that uses an online method of that is called preferential looking paradigm. So we were right, they showed them the objects, right? The keys and the book, for instance. And this is how it's set up. The caretaker, mom, dad, nanny comes into the lab. She sits on the chair and the baby sits on the lap. And the baby usually have either two screens or like one screen with two pictures split up. And there is something going on. For instance, there is a video, right? And the video, they see the video, and after this video, they see two pictures. On one is the kiss, and another is the book. And they hear the question from the experiment, they usually record it. What did the book hit? And what do you think? How the experiment goes on? What is the design here? What do we expect for baby to do? Looking, right? That's how preferential looking paradigm. We expect more looks towards the answer of the question. So what did the book hit? Baby should look at the case. Right? What hit the book, depending on the video that they saw, they should look at the object as the answer. A tricky question for you. The mom, dad, or caretaker always wears the headphones. Why? Not to give any hints to the baby. Not to turn because she doesn't hear the question, right? She doesn't know what's going on. So she doesn't understand the experiment. And that's also pretty smart. They can figure out what we're testing, right? That's why we try to do everything we can to blind, right, or to have the caretaker. We actually have a very similar experimental procedure set up in our lab. It's called head turn preference, when the baby has to turn the head. Not to look, but the head turn. Very cool thing. To give you an answer, babies understand the subject VH question by 15 months, and they understand both questions by 20 months. They don't understand anything but them. Alright, so another very, very similar online eye tracking paradigm is visual world paradigm. This actually implements very similar stuff, pictures. And you hear a stimuli, for instance, from the recording, from the headphones, and we are looking at where do you look when processing the auditory stimuli. For instance, there was the experiment done in 2015 by actually our colleague, Irina, and this was to test whether heritage speakers of Russian, to remind you, these are people who born or immigrated to the United States early, and then they switch to English when they go to school. So we know that they have problems with gender in Russian. Because English doesn't have any gender, by age of 15, they actually lose this grammatical distinction of gender in Russian. They only have very leftovers of it. And this experiment is to test their knowledge of gender, and particularly whether they can predict what the upcoming gender of the noun. For instance, if I start telling you "серебристая," all of you will know that the next noun should be feminine because of the ending of the cerebrista. This experiment tests by the visual world paradigm if heritage speakers know that. by the age, let's say, of 15. So what's going on here is they sit in the lab, they have the computer in front of them, but instead of just this looking thing, there is a camera that actually records their IDs, where they look on the screen with very precise calculations. And imagine you're a heritage speaker, you sit in front of the screen, and first you look at the smiley face to fixate your gaze. And then you hear this, серебристая ракета летела в небе. So, as a monolingual speaker, right, or native speaker of Russian, where would you look? Well, probably there, right? At the picture describing the sentence. What we're actually interested in some kind of anticipatory looks. So, what we're looking at is where do you look while you're still hearing серебристая. So, on this ending, and before the word ракета starts, where do you look? Can you predict that the next thing should be of a feminine gender, grammatical gender? Because everything else does not fit, right? So we have a distractor, самолет masculine, we have a distractor, шарик, right? Masculine, we have plural, does not fit. So if they understand, if they can predict the upcoming gender, in that moment when they hear aya of the adjective, they should hypothetically look at the one picture possible. So what we do then, we collect this data and then we analyze the number of anticipatory looks toward the raketa in comparison to the looks everywhere else. And if there are more looks there, that means they do understand it. If there is not, they don't. To answer the question if they do or not, they do understand something easy like that. But if there are opaque nouns, something that ends in consonant, something like, I don't know, корабль, they actually have no idea whether it's feminine or masculine. This is visual word tracking paradigm. I will also, this is actually what I do most of my time. I do visual world paradigm experiments too, but this is my bread and butter. Eye movements and reading. So when you think about it, you might think that when we read, we move very smoothly across the line. Let's look at the actual data from one of our studies that has the recording of how we read the sentence. This is actually a child reading the sentence. The pink dot is the IDs. Oh, sorry. No. I'll do this again. You got it, right? So as you could have seen, these movements are not smooth at all. We kind of jump and fixate on the words, right? They are very concise movements of the eyes. And these movements, jumps, and fixations are our dependent variables in reading experiments with eye tracking. There are majorly three types of them. First one is fixations. How long do you fixate the word, and how many times do you do that? For instance, in this sentence, and I think this is actually the one that you just saw, you can see that on the word bought, kupil, there is a big circle there. I don't know whether you can see it from the back rows, and it says 430. It means that the participant fixated the word kupil once for 430 milliseconds. That's long. That's actually very long. But you also can see, for instance, that on the word молоко, milk, there are two fixations. One is 276, and another one is short 128 at the end of the, right, on the reflection. So this is how precise the eye tracking is. You can see where do you fixate, how long, how many times per letter. Imagine how many interesting experiments you can do with that. And to actually go back and say why, it's because of this thing that is called mind-eye hypothesis, which means that we as a psycholinguists think that we process something when we look at something. Might be not as precise as it is, but generally I try to based on this assumption that when we process something, we look at it. Average fixation duration in all alphabetic languages is about 250 milliseconds on the words. There are different types of fixations that we are looking at. First fixation on the word, single fixation duration, for instance, on the word kupil, just one gaze duration. There's a sum of all fixations before you read other words, or total time fixations. Total time reading the word. I will tell you why do we split in this kind of small dependent variables, dependent measures.
Sorry, can I ask?
Yeah, absolutely.
What does actually the fixation on the verb, bought or kupil, can mean? Why is it so long?
Very good. So this is the child reading the sentence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So probably, I honestly don't remember the age of the child, but probably, and I will talk about this in a little bit, the fixations that are long usually signal us about some kind of difficulties with lexical access to the word, with the word, visual recognition of this word. Probably this child, this particular child, had problems reading this word and understanding it. That's why the fixations are longer.
Mm-hmm.
I will actually, that's a very interesting question, just wait a couple slides. We also have regressions. So, right, we can go forward with our saccades, we call them, and regressions when we go back. And this is what we're interested in. When you go back most of the time, we're interested in this kind of measurements. So when you go back to reread the part of the sentence, the phrase or the word, it means something's going on cognitively in your mind. Remember like this the balcony stuff, right? You'll probably go back and reread the sentence multiple times because there's some kind of cognitive difficulties processing this garden path sentence, ambiguous sentence. And that's what it is about. So we'll look at how many times do people regress, especially when the sentence has some kind of linguistic manipulation in it. That's the ambiguous sentence. Finally, we have skipping. So when you don't fixate anything. And there's actually a lot of skipping going on. Average skipping probability is 70% of all short words are skipped, like prepositions. Well, we don't need to fixate on that. We can see them with our peripheral vision, right? 20% of long words also skip if they are highly frequent words, if they are highly predictable words in the sentence, if they're, yeah, that's okay. So, for example, in this sentence, the first preposition in is skipped. So to answer Dana's question, we kind of divide these measures into early measures and late measures. The ones I listed, single fixation, first fixation, gaze duration, and skipping, we assume that they reflect lexical access. So if you do it fast, or if you skip a lot, it means you don't have any difficulties to visually recognize this word. If you fixate long, something is going on. And late measures as a total time, regressions, fixating many times, morphosyntactic processing difficulties, or semantic integration information difficulties. Like with this balcony stuff, if you go back a lot of times, something going on with syntactic parsing of the sentence. These measures are all depend on word frequency, word familiarity, age of acquisition of the word, number of meanings, morphology, predictability, plausibility. So if you do psycholinguistic experiment, it's a pain in the to design a great experiment that actually counts all of these factors, and it should. And to actually end the lecture, finish the lecture, I would like to show you also recording from actual experiment that tested again the gender knowledge of heritage speakers, but also collected data from monolingual speakers. So this sentence contained a mistake in the middle. Something like в углу стоял большая с плоским экраном телевизор. So what we thought would happen that monolinguals, when they read the sentence, they would definitely fixate longer on the part where there's a mistake, or they go back, right, to understand the sentence. And as we know, heritage speakers are not as good at it, so we thought nothing would happen. They will just go smoothly and finish reading the sentence. So this is a fun video that has all the pink dots. These are all monolingual speakers that take part in the experiment. And then, in the second part of it, I will stop it. Let's see if it works. It's not clear what's going on, right? Because people read the sentence. But look at this part of the video. This is called a heat map. So the red is where participants look a lot. And I will play this again. Oops. No. So this is just the IDs. Look, so the mistake is somewhere in the middle there. Look how it splits. Boom. Did you see this red here? It's where the participants came back or fixated much longer on the mistake part. And that's when we export the data, we analyze it, and that's it. Monolinguals, when they read the sentence, they're like, what? What's going on? Heritage speakers did not. This is kind of experiment that we can do with eye tracking and reading. This is kind of experiment that we actually brought here with a dig language to do a study with children who learn a dig in English and Russian. And if you're interested in knowing more, please, again, don't hesitate to contact us. Go to the site of the lab, see what we're doing, who is doing what. Talk to your advisors, talk to us. We will be really happy to see you all. Thank you so much. And of course, any questions that you have. I guess. Yeah.
Вы проводили этот эксперимент, да, как вы говорите, какая возрастная группа была?
Давайте на русский перейду, раз вопрос был на русском. Здесь монолингвы были от 25 до 45 лет, наследники русского языка от 20 до 30 лет.
И кто лучше справился? По 25 лет, 45?
Мы не смотрели на разницу по возрастам, то есть мы все сгруппировали. Но это интересная идея. Интересно в этом эксперименте было то, что, представьте, когда у вас много стимулов таких, они разбавлены дистрактором, of course, конечно, чтобы тот, кто принимает участие в исследовании, не понял, о чем эксперимент. Естественно, потом мы тоже ошибки. Но интересно то, что по параметрам движения глаз, чем дальше в эксперименте, тем меньше они фиксировались на ошибке. Потому что у них происходила адаптация к синтаксической ошибке. То есть они понимали, что некоторые предложения будут с ошибкой. Поэтому в анализе данных мы исключили поздние предложения, которые не видели, и смотрели только на ранние. Когда только впервые разы была ошибка. Еще вопрос?
И вот тогда, с какой-то целью ставили, значит, выезд, например, забывания, да, вот, они же живут в чужой среде, да? И они полностью забыли, да, вот, род, абсолютно, они уже как англичане думают, да?
Да, происходит, не полностью, я бы сказала, но происходит так называемая реструктуризация грамматической репрезентации рода. Они вместо того, чтобы различать 3 рода, обычно уходят на 2 сначала, и эти 2, они и то не всегда. На мужской и женский.
Мужской и женский.
Да, средний уходит вообще из проекта.
Скажите, пожалуйста, вы говорили о 15-месячных детях, да? Как вы их выбирали? Ведь тут генетика, тут замедленное развитие. И как мы можем судить о том, что вы говорите, что у такого возраста вот такая реакция на то, что они воспринимают?
Эксперимент не мой, он был сделан в другом университете, но, насколько я помню из прочтения той статьи, они, во-первых, проводили много тестов до этого основного эксперимента на интеллектуальное развитие, на когнитивные навыки младенцев, там уже много всяких тестов. И шла год, то есть они выкидывали из эксперимента тех участников, которые не подходили под группу. Скрининг такой.
Вот ходит женщина, she is pregnant, she is waiting for her child. Ну, она в своей среде находится, и вот говорят, что общаются там со своими близкими, и говорят, что ребенок, уже находясь в утробе матери, начинает различать. Как вы к этому относитесь? Верите?
Положительно, да, я абсолютно, потому что читала об этом много, да. Ребенок в утробе не только различает голоса, естественно, матери или отца, но также различает уже фонотактические паттерны языка, в котором он будет родиться. Спасибо большое еще раз.
I would like to thank our dear guests for the interest to our language. So we're really interested in the collaboration, as you see, and our students as well. So if you have any questions, you may contact Olga and Olga directly. Come up to us. Probably we will collaborate. It will be a long-term collaboration, hopefully, and it will be a productive one, I believe. Thank you ever so much. Thank you. I would like to thank our colleagues and students who are here today.